You're here for the poetry reading class, right? Oh, no, this is the prosperity class. Yay! Yay! I'm really glad that you've chosen to be here tonight, and for us to begin, we're going to begin with spiritual mind treatment. If you don't know what that is, it's affirmative prayer. We're going to pray ourselves in here. So if you would join me by knowing that there's only one presence and one power. It is right here, it is right now, as much as it is anywhere in the entire cosmos. The richness, the power, the presence of the divine is right here. It's here because we're here. And being here, knowing this, allows us to expand our expression into life. It allows us to deepen our understanding of life. It allows us, if we should choose, to walk on fire. And whatever it takes for that to be so, I know it is already so. It dwells within us. And it emerges from us, expanding our awareness of life itself. Only good can come to us. Only good can move through us as we spend this time dancing in the light of spirit, knowing the truth of who we are. So I let that be who we are, allowing it to enliven us, to enrich us, and to fill us up as we do this good work together. Thank you, Spirit. Thank you, life. And we let it be, because God is still all there is.
So it is.
Yay. Very good. Okay. So the first thing that we need to do is some paperwork. It's true. It's true. So Nancy Walton is going to, maybe with some assistance, is going to be passing out release forms. Can I have one of those? So, just so I can remember what it says. Yes, it absolutely does say, including death. Because it's a real fire we're going to go walk on tonight. Those of us that are going to walk. I want to start off by telling you, I don't care whether you walk or not. It does not matter to me one iota whether you choose to do this. This is for you if you want it. If you don't, that's cool. I'm good. But everybody fills out form. All right? Because you can change your mind. Wonderful. Welcome, folks. Find a seat. There's some seats right in the middle here. Some on that end, wherever you'd like to be. So we're all going to fill this thing out. Please read it. And fill it out. And at the bottom, what I want you to do is simply hand it to someone across the table from you and have them sign that that's really you. And let's not get to the point of checking ID. But as much as you're going to do, if you need a pen, we've got pens with David here. Raise your hand if you need a pen.
Might not borrow yours.
It is 7/7/14.
No, did you count these? Good.
Thanks, Mark. Here you go.
Any more pens?
Is there anyone here under the age of 18? Anyone else other than Zay? Everybody else 18 or older? Good. Okay, cool.
By the roads.
So how do you want to do this?
This was to start one.
All right, I'll be happy.
9, 10, 11, 12, 17, 18, 19, 20. So pass all of your papers up and you need to count as many papers, okay? Everybody on this table done?
Hey, what?
Okay, this table, pass all of your forms up and you need 16, okay?
There's 16 here.
So pass all your forms up, and who's going to be responsible? You need to count 16 forms. No, I didn't hear it. Pass all your forms up, and you need 17.
Gotta watch this.
17. Join this table. Daughter.
What's happening right now?
We're doing this by row, by table row. So do you have you've got your 20, great. Do you have yours? You've got your 16, great. It's all right.
What time have brought now?
Is that how many you needed? 16? 16, great. You got your 17. Wonderful. So we haven't quite processed this group yet. How many people are in this row? 14. And 15 and 16. Did you pass yours into here? And 17 and 18. So Nancy, you need 18 forms from this group. Well, we haven't counted the two that haven't walked in the room yet, have we?
Yeah, we were.
We're sitting at this table.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Okay, but with your...
Yeah, walking on fire is actually easier than getting these forms.
19, we need 19 and we can go. This used to take us so long. Look at how smart we are. We work together and we
Who's
self-organize.
taking charge of the people that are walking in the room? Did you do that, Chuck? Just stay with them until they finish.
Susan, don't sit down till you get your release
They're
form.
coming from Chuck here.
And the class is waiting on you. I don't know, we gotta wait for this table, and then as soon as the last two fill out their forms and get them witnessed, we're good to go. Nancy's in charge over there. She said, well, if I was in charge, you would let me count it the way I wanted to. All I want to know is that you got one from everybody.
I'll listen to that all day.
Your office is in the farthest corner away from
I know, but it
mine.
catches the sound.
Are we good? Chuck's witnessing.
I think it's good. I feel good. How many of y'all walked on fire?
Ooh.
How many have never been to a fire walk before? What is wrong with you people? No, we're gonna have a good time. You know, so I so didn't do this last year, and I want to be absolutely clear. This is the first class of the Summer Prosperity Series. We are doing the Summer Prosperity Series basically on the book written by Napoleon Hill, Think and Grow Rich. This is the first class, and we're using the book tonight. If you have a copy of Think and Grow Rich, we're going to kind of give you the direction we're going with what part of the book we're going to be talking about. Tonight, we're talking about chapter 15. That's the last chapter in the book. It's an interesting take. The idea is that he taught everybody all this cool stuff about creating riches in your life, and then he wrote the last chapter on fear. And by the way, if you have any of these issues in your life, all that stuff I taught you in the first 14 chapters won't work. Can you imagine people that stopped reading that book early and kept going, why isn't this working? How are we doing? We got all of our stuff?
We have a release form from
Woohoo!
everybody.
Yay! So let's go build a fire. You know, let's do that, and then we're going to get into Napoleon Hill. This is the way this works. This is a ceremonial fire. What we're going to do is have each one of you take one piece of wood, a piece of firewood, okay, off of the back of the pickup truck that will be sitting out near there. We're actually going to the other end of the property, over by our house in the lower level, and there's a place there where we're actually going to build our fire. Some people who do fire walks actually build the fire before you ever get there. I am far too lazy for that. But we are going to do it ceremonially, so there's going to be some blessings on it, some prayers around it. We're going to smudge everybody. It's going to be lovely. We're going to have a good time. And once that fire is nice and hot, we're going to come back in here and talk about Napoleon Hill. Okay? Yeah. All right, so let's go on out. Who wants to share their thoughts? Not thinking. Too dangerous to think right now. Okay, anybody else?
Cool.
Peaceful. Okay, cool.
Scary, exciting.
Scary, exciting, nice. Jane?
Reminiscence.
Okay, you're reminiscing. All right, yes.
How many years is this going on?
Oh, probably 1,000. Maybe more. Yes, Gary?
I learned that I didn't get time to think about it.
Okay, good, good. Anybody at this moment willing to fess up to having a little fear? 4 people, yeah. Now the rest of you are going, I'm walking on that thing, that is crazy. So let's talk about Mr. Hill. In his book, Think and Grow Rich, chapter 15, he writes, before you can put any portion of this philosophy into successful use, your mind must be prepared to receive it. The preparation is not difficult. It begins with study, analysis, and understanding of 3 enemies, which you shall have to clear out. These are indecision, doubt, and fear. That's pretty simple. How's that working for you? Does knowing that make you all ready to go out there and walk? Yeah, probably not. I kind of questioned why he put the whole idea of fear at the end of the book, but I understand it because if he had put it at the beginning of the book, nobody would have bought it. People don't want to think about their fears. What do you want to think about your fears? The thing is, though, that fear is a natural human experience. We have the capacity within our psyche to be afraid. It's not a bad thing. It protects us in some ways. It's connected to our ego, and our ego is there to protect us. So the idea that we would have fear is natural and normal. The thing is that we overdo it. My wonderful example that I love to use, because nobody really gets excited about venomous snakes in a happy way, is that if I had a venomous snake in a box, and I dumped that venomous snake out onto the floor here, how do you think Olympia would feel? She would be afraid, right? What would she be afraid of? Being bitten, yeah, of course. Being struck by that snake. That's a natural, normal reaction. If the snake bit her, would she still be afraid of being bitten? No. She's been bitten. Now what would she be afraid of? Dying, there you go. It's a natural order of things. Now notice in that very simple example, the elements of fear. Fear is always in the future. It is always based on the unknown. What we are afraid of hasn't happened yet. Therefore, the fear is imagined. What you're doing is using fear as an emotional and thought-provoking way to experience the possibility of what might happen. It's never about what already happened. We're not afraid of the past. You may say, well, I'm afraid of my past, because someone could find out. Yeah, but they're finding out would be in the future, right? Not afraid of the past. We're afraid of the unknowns of the future. That, and what that does is interesting. There's real structure around this. Fear is structural and it's predictive. You can see how it works. And in reading Hill, I came up with a little model that I want to share with you. Because when you have an unknown in your life, there's only two directions you can go in. You can either go into fear or you can go into possibility in a positive way, in a way that you would like, based on your desires. So if you were here, there's only two directions to go with an unknown. That would be upward or backward and downward. One of those two directions is the direction you're going to go with your life, right? So what are the elements of this? Well, let's do the downside first, just to get that done. The first issue that comes to us is indecision. We're just not sure what to do. We haven't decided. We're not sure at all. We haven't made a choice. We're kind of stuck in that place, right? That's the first level that we deal with. And then we go to a question of out. It's almost like this is the seed, and it starts to germinate, and it takes us to, of course, to fear. To where we're actually afraid of an outcome that we don't want. But the thing is so amazing about fear is, it's the perfect emotion to create with. Because it combines the emotion and the idea, you get the feeling and the visual of what it is that you don't want to have happen, and you put all this energy into it. And that is the creative process. So what you end up with, at the bottom of this one, is failure. You end up with the thing you don't want, because you focused all this energy into it. All this creative force into it by saying you don't want it. Because the universe doesn't deal with positives and negatives in your thought pattern, it deals with the object of your attention. That's how it works. So what you pay attention to is what will show up in your life. And if that's what you get, that's where you get it. Now what's on the other side of the scale? It starts with desire. Because there's an unknown here too. Just as unknown as that. Something's got to fill the void. An unknown is a void, and the universe does not work with a void. I can't do this. Just turn it off. You want me to use the handheld? It'll be easier for me. Is that any better? No, that's all. Yeah. How about that? Yeah, it's much better. I'm not just going to use it, right? Now it's good. You can hear it up there? Yeah. I had it on the wrong setting. Okay, so if you can hear me now, that's great. So you've got an unknown, and you turn it into a fear, and you end up with failure, or you create a desire for an outcome. No, it's still not. Okay. Is that what it is? Okay, dokie. So is this working? That's working. So the other end of that is if you set a desire that you want, this is what I want, that will not get you to here. But it is the first step that is required. Desire is a compass. Desire is like, if you're holding a compass, it will tell you where true north is.
And then you can know which direction you want to move in. It's very clear, it's very helpful, but it won't get you there. You can look at that compass all day long and go, ooh, get me there. And it won't, but it'll point the way. So desire is an element that you must have, but you don't stay in the desire. It's like wanting harder does not get you what you want. Are we done, David? Got it? Okay. All right, so we start with desire. And from desire, we have to do something. We have to make some kind of a move, and we do that by setting an intention. So I know what I want, and I have a clear intention that that's what I've got. I don't play around with it. I'm claiming that in my life. That is absolutely true. But even an intention doesn't give you what you want. But it gives you a direction. It's like now you got a real map, and you know what you're doing. You know where you're headed, right? So from intention, we got to move into action. You got to do something. Now, it isn't the doing that gets it for you. But if you don't do it, you're not demonstrating your intention. So these two are actually tied like twins. You set an intention and you take an action in that direction. And then things start happening. Things start happening in your world, all around you. Somebody calls you, somebody sends you an email, someone writes you a letter, something happens. You read an article in the paper. You watch a television show. Something gives you information, and you move on it, you act on it. Because you could sit with a desire and intention all day, and until you take some action, the universe isn't convinced that you really are doing this. But as soon as you start working toward it, things start happening. Things start happening. It's very important. And then, of course, this line leads to the opposite of that line. Success. You get there. And you will. You will. When you say, oh, well, I've done things in my life and they just really didn't work out. And I did that. I wanted it. And I set an intention and I acted. Because this right here stays hidden inside you. You're not willing to look at it. You're not willing to move away from it. Consciously, you have to. It is natural to have fear. Anyone that says, I have no fear, is either lying or belongs in an institution. Because fear is a normal experience of life. But we don't let fear take over. We don't let fear be the boss. In fact, fear can be very informative. Because as I explained with a little story of the snake, is that you have things you have fear of. But by recognizing them, you can begin to see that you made it up. You made it up. The thing you're afraid of is what you're envisioning. You're actually doing the same thing here is. You have a fear, so you have something you're struggling with. You have the greater sense that you could lose or somehow fail. So you see that as a possibility, and then you worry. And then you end up with succeeding at being a failure. So it's really all one direction. The universe doesn't care. The universe isn't into rights and wrongs and goods and bads and success and failure. The universe doesn't work that way. That's how our minds work. The truth is that the object of our attention is what we get. The object of our attention and our action, because we act on what we intend on, is what we get consistently. Well, what about competitions when somebody really tried hard and they lost? Well, that was their path. And they chose to play an interesting game called a win-lose game. And when you play a win-lose game, which is what any competition is, you're saying you're willing to lose. It's just part of that formula. So if you're going to base some kind of a competitive experience, running for public office, being in a sports competition, gambling, any of those kinds of things, you're already saying you're willing to lose. And that's got to be okay. And that's an experience. In fact, if you're playing a win-lose situation, you could say loss is a success because you had that as a full option. Now, if you play a win-win game where you refuse for even the other person to lose, that win-win game will guarantee you a win. because you are willing for that person or that situation to show up, and you do it very consciously, and then you have to win. And in a win-win circumstance, there's no possibility of losing because you're willing for everyone to win. And then what happens is the other person, they can be playing a win-lose game, and that will guarantee them a loss because there's no loss in your model. So if you want to play those kinds of competitive things in life, there's nothing wrong with that. We all do it. We all participate in those kinds of experiences. We bid on contracts. We apply for a job. You know, those are all competitive things. And we have to decide if we're willing to win or win-lose. So that's part of that element. But this is the model that I came up with out of reading Hill, and I think it really is a valid thing. So in the front of each table here, there's a stack of paper, and I want everybody to take 2 sheets and pass them on down. And Nancy, if you'd be sure that there's enough paper on every table, kind of at the other end, in case they run out. I've got my paper up here. You're going to need 2 sheets of paper because we're going to do 2 different exercises. Everybody should have a pen from before in case they turn it back down. Here's a pen lead up here. Yeah, if you need a pen, David got it.
Pen or paper?
It's interesting too that the book that we're working from is called Think and Grow Rich, and Hill actually defines riches in chapter 15. Rich is. It's in parentheses. It's kind of a afterthought here. He said the word riches, it is here used in its broadest sense, meaning financial, spiritual, mental, and material estates. So when we talk about riches over the next few weeks, we're not just talking about money. Money's fine. Money's important. Money's a thing that we all are involved with. But it is not the whole thing of richness. Richness is bigger than that. And anybody that just plays in the arena of money, calling that riches, lives a pretty shallow life. How many of you were here yesterday? So you saw that thing from Jim Carrey at the end? The idea where, and I'll paraphrase, where he said, I wish that everybody could experience great prosperity and celebrity and have everything they ever desired so they can know that that's not the answer. The answer is bigger than that. It's bigger than anything that would fill your ego. But the starting idea is, if we're going to get where we want to go, we can't go there with fear. Fear will not allow us to move into that place that we want to go. As natural as it is, it's a natural enemy of moving into the life that we desire. It's going in the wrong direction. And everybody, I don't care, you can pray all day. You can read every book on the subject of prosperity. But if you're dealing with fear in your life in a way that you are not in charge, but it is in charge, that is what wins. Every time. And I've had plenty of fear in my life. And I've seen how it has shut me down. So I've worked diligently to let go of that. Now, does that mean I never feel fear? Of course not. But my relationship with it is I am very clear that fear is showing me what I don't know the answer to yet. That's all it can do. It's showing me that I have not done this thing yet. And for that I'm grateful, because it reminds me, hey, you haven't done this before. This is new territory. You don't have any model, any experience in the past that's going to tell you how this turns out. I maybe have a tinge left of fear as I'm standing in front of the fire, and it comes up for just a moment, and then I walk and it goes away. But that first one, it was like, there's no way in hell I'm going to go out on that fire. That's crazy. I'm looking at that thing going, somebody's going to die here. You know, it was just bizarre to me. Yet I still did it, and got through it. So the thing in life is that if we allow our fear to be in the driver's seat, we give up where we're going. Then the fear's in charge. Then the fear will take us to the thing that we'll end up calling failure. That doesn't work. So what we're going to do tonight is a fearless inventory. Maybe fearless isn't the right word for that one. I love that they use that in AA. We're going to do an inventory of our fears and see where they are, based on Hill's model, because he says there's 6 of them, and that there are symptoms for each one. So we're going to look at those, and you have a sheet of paper that I want you to identify where you have fear in your life. And what we're going to do, I want you to know this before you write anything down, is what we're going to do with those papers is we're going to take them and fold them up and put them in that basket over there, and we're going to throw them in the fire. All right? To give you a model for letting go of that. We're going to do other things too, but that's what this exercise is about. So I'm going to read through this thing about fear and let you do the work of deciding what it is. David, this is okay. Yeah, okay. So what we're going to do is we're going to go through this and figure this out in a way that you can identify what you're afraid of. We're not going to stay there forever. You know, if we stayed there, it would just expand on it, but we're going to identify some stuff and write it down, and then be ready to let it go. Does this work for you? Yeah. Okay. You don't have to share this with anybody. So don't worry about having to share what you're writing down. This is really just for you right now. Let me give you the first, the 6. He calls them the ghosts of fear. He said there are 6. They are fear of poverty, fear of criticism, fear of ill health, fear of loss of love or loss of someone, fear of old age, and fear of death. So let's go through those one at a time and look at it. The fear of poverty. That's a pretty clear one to see, that many people fear that they'll be impoverished. If Barbara was in the room, she would tell you that early in her life, actually her sister could witness this, that Barbara had a fear of being a bag lady. Bag lady. Now you all look at who Barbara is today and you think that's impossible, that would never happen. But there was a time in her life when she had models of people that were destitute. And she had that fear that she could end up like that. Many people have that kind of fear. You know, we have some safety nets in this country that at least keep people at some level of subsistence living. But for many generations before us, especially the people that went through the Great Depression, they had none of that. And actually, Hill wrote this book at the time of the Great Depression. In fact, a lot of great books on prosperity were written during and right immediately after the Great Depression. He says in chapter 15 that he wrote this book to counteract an entire generation that felt a sense of impoverishment, that had lost their sense of having wealth. You know, before the Great Depression, there was a great sense in this country that there would always be all this amazing opportunity, and then suddenly everything crashed and everyone got afraid, and an entire generation lived in that fear. If any of you knew your grandparents or great-grandparents that went through that, old enough to know what was going on, you know how that stayed with them. How they were so careful with their money, how they were so concerned that there would be enough, and pass that along to their children as an appropriate way to be. The problem with that is that if you live in the fear, you create the fear and you create the failure. So you must move into a different state. So the idea of being impoverished has symptoms. The fear of being in poverty has symptoms. These are the things that show up before you achieve impoverishment. And they begin with indifference. Being indifferent to the things in your life, being disconnected, being apathetic, not having this path of any interest in this path. Now the chances of that being true in this class are relatively 0. Why would you get up on a beautiful night like tonight and come sit in a room where there's ridiculous fire burning out there and people are going to walk on that? Why would you do that if you were on this path? So chances are you're not, as much as you are on this idea of there's something you desire in your life and that you have some interest in that. But poverty is based first in indifference. Then it's in worry. Worry. Do you worry about this? Do you worry about having enough money? Do you worry about paying your bills? Do you worry? If you worry, you're on this path. Again, the thing about the symptoms and the idea of these 6 fears is based on the fact that they don't come up that often. I mean, when they do, you think about it. You know, you look at the balance in the checkbook, you get the bill. Oh, I spent that much money? Oh. You know, if you have those kinds of thoughts going on inside of you, you're feeding this path. The idea is that if you are clear about what you're doing and you have an intention set, you're moving in this direction and the things in your life are showing up. The fear path has worry. Being overcautious. Overcautious. Now, there's nothing wrong with paying attention to what's happening, to be aware of what's going on. The thing is that if you place too much attention on what's not working, or what hasn't worked, or what didn't turn out exactly the way you wanted it to turn out, if you put too much attention on that and you were overcautious, what you're doing is you're limiting your ability to be in that flow. I hear it all the time around tithing. Oh, I couldn't possibly afford to put 10% out for nothing. No, it's not for nothing. The idea is to generate flow in your life, to be in that flowing activity, to be actually saying, I have more than enough, and to demonstrate that. That's the purpose of it. Tithing is not a spiritual practice. It's not a spiritual principle. It is a spiritual practice, meaning that you do it to get the result of knowing who you are and that you always have more than enough. There's no spiritual principle to tithing. The spiritual principle is that you create out of what you do and what you think. That the object of your attention is what creates. And tithing is the thing that we do joyously and gratefully. If you say, well, I'll put in my tithe check, but I'm worried about it, then it's not working. That just won't help anybody. But if you do it joyously and know that you always have more than enough, that's exactly what happens. The last symptom of the fear of poverty is procrastination. I'll do it later. Sure, I really want to do that. I really want to do it, but I just don't have time right now. I don't have enough money to do it right now. I'll get around to it. If you have those kinds of thoughts about things that are going on in your life, then that's leading you in that direction of fear of poverty. Any questions about the fear of poverty? Anyone not understand something that I've shared? Yes?
The things that you share, are you just talking about poverty? Or
Yes, poverty is what we're talking about at this
Or are
moment.
you talking about procrastination all over your life?
I'm saying procrastination anywhere in your life is leading you to poverty.
Okay.
Right. Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Yes?
In poverty, you're talking about spiritual poverty and other types of poverty as well as
Of course.
financial,
Absolutely.
all kinds of poverty.
Absolutely. But you know, they're all tied together.
Right.
You know, if you're I don't know how you can live a spiritually fulfilling life and be dead broke. You know, that's unrealistic to me. They're all tied together. And that doesn't mean that you are a millionaire, and that doesn't mean that millionaires are more spiritual, are more conscious or aware of their spirituality. Some are, some aren't. But the wholeness of who we are, whether we're in a state of wealth or we're in a state of being impoverished, ties all those elements together. Yeah. Anything else? Yes.
You said fear is telling you you're afraid of something you haven't done before.
Yeah.
What if you're terrified of something you have done before?
Well, how can that possibly be? Give me an example.
Scuba diving.
Mm-hmm.
I'll never go scuba diving again. When I say that,
So your fear is of going scuba diving and drowning, or something going wrong, the bends, whatever. You have some fear of that. You're not afraid of the certificate. I mean, if the certificate was on the table, couldn't you go over and pick it up?
no, I'm just saying that I've gone through an entire course.
Right.
So I've done it.
But the thing you're afraid of is not what you've already done. It's what would happen in the future. No?
But when I think of it, I think of the fear of like putting my face in the water.
Yeah, but your face isn't in the water now. So you would have to do that in the future. You would have to do that in the future. So the fear is in the future. You're not going to do it. Okay. That's fine. But understand that what you're afraid of is the idea of that happening in the future. Not knowing how it would turn out. Because you could put your face in the water and be fine. Or you could put your face in the water and drown. Or anything in between. So it's the unknown that holds the fear. Now, if you, with that fear, decided to go scuba diving, change your mind, somebody talked about it, and you actually did it, and came out of the water, you wouldn't have had fear of what you'd just done. The fear can't be behind you. It can't be in the past. The fear is always in the future. Does that make sense? Yeah. Good for you. Good for you. Anyone else? Yes.
I feel like I have to balance between knowing that wasting is one way to free up my flow, but also I feel sort of necessity to help keep from destroying the environment and that kind of stuff.
Wasting is a way to free up your flow.
Well, yeah.
I would challenge that.
Well, Barbara said.
Okay, well, Barbie's not here.
Process, if you're willing to waste.
I've burned $100 bills. I understand the concept of unlimited source. I also know that everything I do has to have intention. And if I'm calling it wasting, then to me, I have set an unreasonable intention. I want everything that I do to have value. Burning a $100 bill for me was the value of knowing that I could create as many more of those as I wanted. So it wasn't wasting that $100 bill that I burned, which is against the law, by the way. Not only pissed off a lot of people in the audience when I did it. Oh, you could give that to a charity. But it's not. But for me, it was of value because it reminded me I can create that as much as I want. So that's how I would answer that. I wouldn't call it wasting because there's an intention attached to it. That's what makes it work for me. I am not frivolous. In fact, I'm pretty frugal with most things. So, but then again, when I want something, our 25th wedding anniversary, I'm taking Barbara to Thailand. I'm going to get a Thai massage every day. And I'm sure she'll buy something. It'll be wonderful. So I'm glad to do that, and that really works for me. So as long as there's intention, a clear intention, I think that's valuable. To be frivolous, it means that makes no sense. All right, so we're good with fear. Good. We understand the fear of poverty, right? Okay. The fear of criticism. The easiest one to connect this to, do you know when they survey people about what they're afraid of, what the #1 answer is? Public speaking. Why would that be? Because you get up and say something and people can criticize you. They can think you're wrong. They can get up and walk out. Why would you put yourself through that, right? It's the fear of criticism. I actually had an interesting experience with that just yesterday. Any of you that were in the room know that I had a series of slides, and one of them was kind of cute, had a baby that looked like was that little less than a year old had just broken through some bricks with its fist. It hadn't, but it was a cute picture. And that picture showed up on the screen before I was ready for it. And in that moment, I looked at the person, their first time running our PowerPoint, and I called them Dad. I took it back immediately, but you say it, you can't take it back, especially in a public speaking. I got a call this morning from one of our members who said they were considering leaving the center because I did that. So I reached out to the beautiful being that was back there. We had a lovely chat. And I said, "Are you upset with me?" And she laughed. She said, "I knew you would play with me." She didn't take it personally at all, but other people might have. So that idea of being criticized, I had to look at it. And I learned from it. And I learned that just because I'm frustrated, and it wasn't what she did in that one little slide, it's the fact that for years now I've had no control over the slides on the screen as I'm trying to give my talk. No matter how much I coach the beautiful beings back in the booth, they are not going to do it the way I want to do it. So Rodney Embler, who is the head of that particular group, and I had a conversation today, and I'm not using PowerPoint slides until I have a clicker. When I have a clicker, I'll do that. And the beautiful beings in the back can give you the lyrics of the songs and all the pretty pictures, but I'm controlling my slides from now on. Fear of criticism. So symptoms of criticism. Self-consciousness. Being self-conscious. Lack of poise. Poise is a kind of old word. Holmes used it a lot in his writings. I love it. It's a wonderful word. It's about standing in who you are. If you're poised, you know who you are, and it shows in your physical presence. Lack of poise means you're not so clear about who you are. Weak personality. Having a weak personality. Being timid, being uncertain of yourself, being kind of holding back on who you are. That shows a fear of criticism. Having an inferiority complex. People who think poorly of themselves surely have a fear of criticism. Here was an interesting one that Hill brought up. Extravagance. Extravagance? That's when people are trying to be as good as the people around them by spending and buying things so that they can look good. They don't feel good, they want to look good. They want the outside appearance to be better than the inside, so they live more extravagantly. People who find themselves in great amounts of debt have fear of criticism because they're spending so they can look better. You know, teenagers are notorious for this. It's interesting, teenagers are notorious for being extravagant and for suicide. It's the same thing. Lack of initiative. Lack of initiative. Everybody okay? Make sure that thing is all the way down there. Lack of initiative and lack of ambition. Ambition is an interesting one. In our culture, we have a love-hate relationship with ambition. You know, if someone's too ambitious, then we see them as less than okay. And someone who has no ambition is just worthless. So we're trying to find where that is in the middle. We're trying to be ambitious and humble at the same time. We're very neurotic as a culture. But having no ambition at all, having nothing to drive you in your life, is a sign of fear of criticism. Any thoughts or questions on the idea of the fear of criticism? The fear of ill health. This movement was founded on reversing illness conditions in people. Metaphysics was all about healing people from their maladies. And this was a good start. And it really had a lot. I mean, the whole thing of Mary Baker Eddy and Christian Science was about her getting sick and the doctors making her sicker. And her deciding that if she did the right kind of prayer, that things would turn around in her life, and they did. And then she convinced a lot of other people of the same. And then her students said, that's enough of you, Mary, we're going to go off and do it on our own. And things showed up like religious science, and unity, and divine science, and a bunch of other things showed up. This idea of working with physical conditions is a keen part of who we are as a spiritual movement. Yet, many people still fear illness. And think about it, you know? How many people in this room could experience cancer, or heart attacks, or how many other things? So to have concerns about those things is real. And that's something that we have to look at. There's quite a list of things that Bill points out to around the idea of fear of illness, ill health or illness. First one is auto-suggestion. Meaning that if somebody talks about being sick, do we get sick? If somebody talks about a rampant flu season, do we get the flu? Are you prone to get whatever is going around? Some people are. Some people are. And it's not conscious. It's not that you're looking to get sick. But somebody suggested it, talked about it going on, and we ended up with it. That's autosuggestion. Is that something that goes on in your life? If it is, make note of that. Another one is hypochondria. It's spelled Hypochondria. Hypochondria. That means you make sickness up. I have a real distinct difference with much of our medical, our allopathic medical philosophy, in that they spend a lot of time studying DNA and finding out if we're susceptible to certain diseases. And what ends up people do is they have parts of their bodies amputated so that they won't get a certain illness. What's interesting is in the studies, some of the studies that have been done, when they look at family patterns of disease, the family patterns of disease follow generation to generation, even with adopted children. It is. It's absolutely the same level of passing on of disease from generation to generation with adopted children. It's not in your body, it's in your mind. It's in your mind. So if you think because your parent had something that you're going to get it, you might. You really might. So look at that. Lack of exercise. Lack of and I'm not talking about joining a gym. I'm talking about being lethargic, about not taking care of your body, about not supporting the idea of being healthy. That's the thing that makes someone susceptible to illness. Walking, swimming, high susceptibility, meaning that you believe that you can get sick from any kind of contact, which is kind of crazy because most doctors that work in hospitals and that see people with contagious diseases all day don't get it. Right? But if you've got somebody living 2 doors down that got it, and you want to play the susceptible game, you're going to get it. Quite amazing. Quite amazing. Self-coddling. You talk a lot about how you got to take care of yourself. How you really got to be careful and slow down and make sure that you get taken care of. That self-coddling, that can work against you. People who have the vigor of life, who are engaged in life, don't get sick much because they're engaged in life. People who hold back and hide a little bit get sick more. Now, I'm not standing here saying I haven't had illnesses. I have. In fact, Barbara's pointed out some patterns in the past. I'm being more aware of them and not allowing them to happen. Intemperance. Intemperance. What does that mean? Over medicating with alcohol and drugs. Counting, relying on drugs. Relying on pharmaceuticals or even recreational stuff to get you through. I need that. Got to do it. If you need that, what you're doing is you have a fear of ill health. Questions about fear of ill health? Any questions, Tom? Any thoughts? Yes.
Bruce Lipton, he's the one that is the
Oh, I know
biology, cell
Yeah.
biologist. And the brain of the cell is not the genetics, but it's the cell membrane, which has the antenna that reaches up and collects information
Right.
from where.
Right. Every cell relates to its environment. And it receives information in 2 specific ways. One from the cells around it that is telling you what's going on, and the things that are the chemical compositions that are touching the outside of that cell, and the other is the information that you're getting from your thinking. That's why someone can hypnotize you, put a piece of ice on you, tell you it's fire, and you'll put up a blister. Because you're telling your body that you just got burned, so your body puts up a blister.
Let's talk about that around fireworks. I mentioned yesterday that the first firewalk I was close to happened 2 weeks before I showed up in my first Science of Mind Center in Miami. One of the people that was there for that firewalk is Margaret over here, Barbara's sister. Barbara, of course, was there too. I wasn't, but I heard the stories, and Margaret had a situation, may I speak? Yeah. Margaret had a situation where she came back into the room fine after the firewalk, but somebody was showing their feet, and they had blisters, and Margaret immediately got blisters. Well, I told Tolly Burcan Margaret's story when I was out in California learning about being a firewalk instructor. He said, "Oh, that's nothing." He said that there were a group of engineers that came and did a firewalk with him. And after the firewalk, they all went home. And they got back together a month later. And one of them said, "You should see my feet. They're covered with the remnants of blisters." Every engineer sitting at that lunch table immediately got blisters on them. Huh. So apparently, engineers are highly suggestible. Thank you, Margaret. Any other questions or thoughts about ill health? Yes. I'm sure you could. I'm sure you could. Abuse of exercise or lack of it would probably equally be the truth. Anything else? Anyone else? Okay, number 4. Fear of loss of love or of someone. 3 basic symptoms that have to do with this one. One would be jealousy. Jealousy. If you have a jealous nature, if you are suspicious of someone that you you're in relationship with, and you have a symptom that you are afraid of losing that person. That's not hard to figure out. Fault finding. Trying to find fault in the person that you're in a relationship with is a clear indication that you have that fear. Because if they cross their eyes at you, they must be cheating. You know that in traditional wedding ceremonies in this country, there's nothing where the two people are agreeing not to have other encounters, physical, sexual encounters. I think we should add that if we want it. Right? But it's not in there. I'm sure that's just, sensibilities of having your parents and your grandparents there when you're getting married. You're talking about such things, but everybody assumes that. The culture says that's it. But if you never agreed to it, how can you be breaking an agreement you never made? Think about it. It's kind of weird. Excessive gambling. Excessive gambling is a symptom of fear of loss of love. So says Hill. The whole idea of fear of loss of love is such an amazing thing. And it always comes down to how much we love ourselves, how much we believe in ourselves, how much we are bringing to a relationship. I can talk about that all night, but I won't. Anybody have any thoughts on this idea of loss of love? That could be something in your life. Make a note of that. Fear of old age. Symptoms are blaming things you don't like about yourself on your old age. If you're blaming things in your life that you don't like on your age, then you have a fear of being old. And using age as a limitation. Some of you are looking at blank stares, so this is not an issue for you. I like that. And fear of death, which is the second most common fear in the human experience. The symptoms are thinking about and making choices based on when you will die. Yes?
What's the first?
Public speaking, fear of criticism.
Okay.
Any questions on any of that? So I want you to look over this list of whatever you've written down here on the piece of paper. Either circle it if you've already written it there, or write it down on a separate piece of paper. The number one thing that you think is a fear in your life based on the symptoms that we're talking about. Yeah, pick the major one, yeah. If you want to write down the top 2 or 3, I don't care. I just want you to be fully aware that there's something that's got you. We all got something.
And it doesn't make you a failure, it doesn't make you wrong. In fact, what we're doing right now is we're identifying something and we're going to work it in rhythm. We're going to work at resolving. So don't be afraid to choose something. Yeah, just pick the top one you think. And if you don't know what the top one is, if you've got 2 or 3 that you're looking at, say, what am I more afraid of, this or this? Whatever pops up, that's the truth.
Could it be something that's not on that list?
Sure, if it's something that's not on the list, Hill says that those are it and everything else falls into one of those areas. But if you've got another way to write it, and you don't want to connect it to one of these, James, I don't care. Is there anyone here that has not found one in their lives? Oh, wow, got a room full of players. Cool. All right. So, whatever it is, however it is, go ahead and fold up that sheet of paper. Yeah, we will. We gotta get them all in, well, we don't have to get them all in the basket. Yeah, if you need to crinkle it, but I'd rather you fold it so we can get them all in the basket. Put that in there. Nancy, will you go to the back of the room like these baskets? Thank you. Nancy's going to collect them at the end of the table, so just keep them down there for a minute.
One more to put
There is now you run it down and you put it in the basket. Is there anybody who doesn't remember what their greatest fear was? See, you are so comfortable with your fear. Well, I think that's one of the things about life. Whatever's going on that we don't want, we know all about it. We are experts on it. So what I'm going to need is the baskets in the So we're experts on those kind of things. Thank you, please. Yeah, that's all right. That's all right. So everybody's got something, and that's okay. In fact, if you said you didn't have something, I'd be worried about you. I'm not worried about any of it. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to create a statement. We're going to create a statement that is going to distance ourselves from this. And this is how the statement goes. Indulge. Let's spell this right. No longer indulge in the debilitating act of your fear. Whatever it is. I want you to write that on the other piece of paper that you've got. No longer indulge in the debilitating act of what? It could be one of the symptoms. No longer indulge in the debilitating act of
what we don't know.
Who still needs time? Okay, give us a few seconds more. No longer indulge in the debilitating act of. Put down whatever that thing is that you figure is your biggest fear, the thing that's in your way. Now there's a reason that that's your fear. Whatever it is, there's a reason that's what's kind of bubbled to the top in this exercise. And it has to do with you. It has to do with your life, your past, things that have happened, something, in some way, this was helpful. At least you thought so. And maybe it was for a while. You know, maybe it was for a while. So let's not just say this is all bad. It's not. There was some reason that you did this. And here's how you address that. At the end of whatever you've written, put a comma. Right? Which in the past, I used to. What did you use that fear for? What did you use that way of thinking? How was that helpful? How did that, did you think, kept you away from something that was dangerous or something that didn't serve you? What was it that thing did? Let's give it its glory for a minute. Let's give it its justification for a moment. You weren't wrong to do this. It seemed to fit at the time. It may have started when you were a kid. It may have started when you were in school. It may have started when you got married the first time. Or the third time. Doesn't matter. For some reason, that thing ended up in your life. So what is it that you used it for? What value did you seem to be getting out of it at some point? Teasing somebody in the back here earlier about sitting in the back, and I said, "Are you Baptist?" I grew up Baptist. And I was told early on in my life that I was a miserable sinner. And in the context of that religious construct, that made sense to everybody. It made sense. And I struggled with it. Because I didn't want to be miserable. I didn't want to be a sinner. But I didn't know how not to be, because that's what they said I was. And they weren't just saying it was me, it was everybody. So they weren't picking on me, but I struggled with it. But what I did was, I created a really strong inner critic that would tell me that I was wrong. It would point out my sins and my shortcomings. And that was how I played my life. I even did some great things early on in my life. I ran a company. I started a company, founded it when I was in my 20s. And by the time I was 30 years old, we were doing $4.5 million in business every year. I had 28 employees. I thought I was doing great. Crumbled. I was still living in that model of a miserable sinner, and I just couldn't make it work. So my statement is, I no longer indulge in the debilitating act of self-judgment, which in the past I used to keep myself small. Yeah. That was my statement. And that was the truth in my life. There's another part to this statement, the second sentence. Now, instead, you want to replace that. How do you want to move from being on this path with that fear to this path? How do you want to do that? What's your strategy? This is a starting point. This is a starting point. You don't have to have your final words around any of this. You can go home and rewrite this 1,000 times to get to where you want. But you got to do something tonight to get it started or you won't get it. It's all in procrastination. To write something down. Instead I whatever's there.
Okay. A little heavy. That's okay. That's okay. Because we're talking about your fear. It's perfectly normal. So here's what I want you to do. Anybody need a little more time on this? Okay, a little more time. Just keep working. Keep working. Yes, you have a question?
Yeah, I mean, what if the thing that your thing is what has kept you alive? You know,
Your fear has kept you alive.
yes, that
Okay.
like the thing that my fear has kept me alive in my life. How do you
Are you open to talking about this?
kind of?
Well, come on up here. No, this is great. You be our guest of honor and sit in the teacher's chair. Okay, well, then just tell me right now. So you say you have a fear that's kept you alive. Tell me about this.
I worried since I was a child because my father was supposed to me. So by worrying, I kind of stayed alive. And even though you're saying that's what worrying has.
What was it that you had?
This
You're schizophrenic. And have you been diagnosed with schizophrenia?
I'm not,
Okay, all right. How are you managing that?
not great.
Well, could it be that by worrying about it, you're adding to the difficulty of it?
I don't worry about it as much as you might think.
Well, you just said you were.
I do worry
It keeps
about
you
it, but
alive.
not, but that's not specifically what I worry about. I worry about money, I worry about
Okay.
poverty. And, but
And how's your-
worry has, in my life in the past, has had me, that's not what I used to survive when I was younger, but it's what I'm involved in my life, so
It's the hard. It's the really hard. By worrying, you're drawing attention to the things that you don't do. So what you're doing in the dynamics of spiritual law is you're saying to the universe is, this is what I want, because the universe takes the object of our attention. So when we worry, it's like wearing a neon sign that says, give me this thing I'm thinking about. It doesn't understand, keep it away from it. What we think about is what we create. If you use the same energy that you say you put into worrying about creating initiative in your life, looking for ways to improve your life, and acting on that, this would not be your issue. So that thing that's happening inside of you, you have used and held to all these years, and it has held you in that place of not knowing. So if you want to break that cycle, you may have to let go of the worry. You may actually have to embrace the idea that there's more to you, and that this idea of being bipolar, however you're managing that, might be something that you can rise above as well. Because the divine blessing. Allison, you're the presence of God. Your life is the divine presence. You have the power to create your life any way you want. So that if you are able to refocus on things that you desire, and to create intention around those desires, and to actually do something with it, your life is going to change. And it doesn't have to take years. Bill says there sometimes this thing is slow. But he's talking about this. But on this end, things can change overnight. You can have instant changes in your life by the people around you, by the things that you do, by what shows up in the mail, by whatever means you want to have show up. And by worrying about it, you're creating a barrier between you and everything you desire. Focus on these things and see if it doesn't change. Let go of that worry. It's holding you in a place where you're not getting what you want. Are you getting everything you want in life? People who worry don't. They can't. They don't want it to be that way. Nobody's trying to live in difficulty. But this is, it's structural. It has dimensions to it. And if you play by these rules and put your energy here and deny this, if you say you no longer indulge in the debilitating act of worrying, which in the past you used to survive, now instead you live a full, rich life with abundance. That's the life. Any other questions?
Who's feeling pretty secure in their statement? Like they mean it? Ah, very good, over here. Pat. Yeah, come on. Bring it with you so you know what to tell me. Unless you got it? You got it. You gonna share it with us? You gonna share it with me? Okay, now I'll listen up because this is what's gonna happen. Pat is gonna tell me what's really working for her, and I'm gonna tell her that's a bunch of bunk. I'm gonna tell her I don't believe it. And she's gonna convince me that it is. Right? So we're gonna do this for a minute. So I'm intentionally resisting this so that you get stronger. Okay? I want you to convince me that your statement is real. And you're ready.
I don't like you.
Okay. So I chose the fear of getting old.
Okay.
And one of my favorite phrases that I say about myself is that I'm an old hippie.
Okay.
And I decided that's really not very useful for me.
So instead you do what?
So I'm going to not indulge in that ability.
You're not going to indulge in what you're going to do instead.
Instead, I am dropping the word old or young. I'm just not even characterizing myself in terms of age.
Okay.
And
Hey, you're very old. You're very old.
And I don't need to put myself in any category in society such as hippie. So I am just free and unlimited.
I don't understand hippie, but you guys are convinced. I'm not sure about this thing about not being old because I'm pretty old. Come on, convince me.
I am a hell of a lot younger than a lot of
That's now we're getting it.
Yes, be 10 years younger than I am.
Okay, all right. Now I'm waiting. I need help. Come here. Tell her she's old. Come on. Help. Tell her she's old. You're not convinced. Are you convinced? Don't be convinced.
Sing it.
Give her more. She wants more.
No, she's too easy.
No, come on. You got any more for us? You got some more. Come on. Do it again. Give us some more. Convince us that you're not, that you are what you say you are.
That I'm not old?
Well, no, we're not moving away from that. We're moving into something new. What are we moving into?
What are you talking about?
Talk about your life and how it's working and how that's not the truth. That the truth is this.
Okay, I'm a little lost. You mean you want me to pull out another beer?
Okay, no, come back. We're going to turn this around. You stand over there. Turn around. Okay, now I'm going to talk, okay? Okay, here's what I want you to know is that I have moved out of self-judgment. I don't judge myself. I love myself. That's how I live my life. Tell me you don't believe that. That's your job right now. Tell me you don't believe that. Yeah, okay, so but I'm telling you, it's true. Aren't you convinced that I'm living that life filled with all kinds of wonderful experiences and that I've completely released any idea of self-judgment? Yeah.
No, so what will happen the next time it's like?
I'm telling you, this is over. I'm not doing this anymore. No, I'm not doing it. No, listen to me. I'm not doing this anymore. I am living a loving, beautiful life. No matter what you say, that's the truth of who I am. Yeah, see if you got it. You got another minute.
How can I get around this?
No, the truth is,
Red face, loud voice.
All my life, I'm living the life of my dreams.
Then don't try to prove it.
And let you know that this is the truth of my life. Of 3 or 4, each one of you take your turn. The point of the exercise is to make them convince you. To make them convinced. Give them some resistance so they can work against it. Before you do it, let me tell you my story. The day I did this, I was in a room of about 3,000 people. I stood with 3 other people, and I spoke into that circle with such insistence that I could no longer judge myself. So I would not judge myself any longer. And when I was complete and they all said, okay, we believe you, I stepped out of that circle. I went to a payphone. This was pre-cell phones. And I called Barbara and I sobbed. I let it go. I really let it go. I want you to let go of your fear. Let go of your fear now. Get in circles and do it. You can go right over the people closest to you. 3 or 4 people. Each one of you take a turn. Do it quickly. What's that?
I realized
this is ours.
Now let's apply this to a firewall. Alright? It's getting late. I don't know if we can told you this was going to go later than 9 o'clock. All the rest of the prosperity classes will end at 9. We're very, very close to that. We still have to go walk on fire. So those of us that are going to do it. Let's talk about walking on fire. Connie Burkan, my teacher, said there's only 3 things to know about walking on fire. The first one is you need to be able to pay attention. Let me tell you that this fire is real. It's hot. It's gotten up to over 1,800 degrees out there while Barbara's working on it. And she's working pretty hard. She's got a bandana and she's sweating. Probably has lost all the hair on her arms because it gets hot out there. It's settling down when we walk to about 1,250 degrees. An aluminum engine block will melt at 1,100 degrees. So the fire will be at 1,250 when we walk on it. The idea of walking on it is not to convince yourself it's not real. It's to convince yourself that you're more powerful than it. I am not your teacher tonight. The fire is. Those of you who choose to walk on this fire will have an experience of overcoming something that many people say is impossible. That you should immediately at those temperatures have burns. You don't have to have burns. You don't have to have burns at all. Those people that walk on the fire don't have any sense of discomfort afterwards. Sometimes you get hot feet, that's perfectly fine. Okay? And the idea is that when you're aware of what you're doing, when you know what you're facing, and you recognize that you are more powerful than that fire, then you can do whatever you need to do and not have it hurt you. The idea when people have been hurt, and I've seen that, they very clearly got that they were burned, and they claimed their burns, and they showed their burns. You don't need to do that tonight. We've only had one person get burned on a fire that we've done. I know people have gotten blisters and such, and that happens at times. But the only person that ever went to the hospital was that very first night when we had somebody come in here to lead a fire walk, and we had people sit out at the fire that showed up and just went out there. They didn't sign a form, they didn't listen to the workshop, they didn't participate in it. They just said, oh, we'll just walk when they come out. And nobody knew any better at that point. And one of them got up and said, I'm going to walk in the fire. And she got it, she walked out, she was fine. And the other one said, I'm going to regret it if I don't walk on that fire. So she did, and when she came across and I hugged her, she screamed in my ear, I'm burned! And she was. And she went to the hospital. Oh, this Barbara freaked out that we were going to get sued. Because she hadn't signed the form. And we called Barbara's mentor, Edwin Gaines, who's also a firewalk instructor, trained by the same man that I was. And Edwin said to Barbara, so let me get this straight. This woman's going to stand before a judge, and the judge is going to say, did you know it was a fire? Case dismissed. Dummy. So we all know it's a fire. And you will see people walk across the fire and be. And you can take that information and apply it to your life. And you can also take this information, should you choose to walk in the fire, choose to hold in your hand your statement, or you have it in your pocket, however you want to do it. Carry it out there with you, and walk across that fire, making that real in your life. If that's yours to do. If it's not yours to do, there's no blame, there's no fault, there's no less than. This isn't for everybody. You get something simply by seeing other people do it. So don't feel like it's something mandated, it's not. It's only for those that choose to. When we go out there, we'll all surround the fire. We're going to sing a song that we sing every Sunday morning that has to do with love. Saying, there's only love. We're going to fill that space with love. This is what makes this work. I'm sure that, I'm certain of it. I would never go out into a place and build a fire and walk across the fire myself. Now, I just would never do that. But when I do it with other people, it's like everybody lifts everybody up. Everybody carries everybody across the fire. There's a great energy but the symbiotic experience of everybody being engaged in every person who walks. So when we go out there, we don't chit-chat. We don't get distracted. We don't even talk about what just happened to us if we walk across the fire. We help the next person across the fire by lifting them up. Lifting them up. That's the awareness that we're looking for. That's the paying attention that makes this work for me. That's what it means. We pay attention to every step we take on the fire. You cannot know for sure that you're going to do this until you're ready to do it. You've got to be standing in front of that fire. You've got to be looking at me or whoever you want standing on the other end of that fire. And you have to consciously choose to be on the other side. Tolly says the way you do that is you know that it's going to be maybe 4 steps. So you count your steps backward across the fire and then you take your steps forward. If that's your prep. He's an interesting guy. He's Jewish. And the way he walks across the fire is that if he stands there, looks across the fire and sees the presence of Jesus Christ, he walks on the fire. Whatever works! Whatever works! Don't worry. Jesus was a Jew also. So it's just like a brother over there. No big deal. You know, whatever works for you. The idea is, though, you don't look at the fire. The fire is the block. It's the barrier. It's the thing that would stop you. It's the fear. You don't look at the fear. You don't give your attention to the fear. You do what Jesus did. Get thee behind me, Satan. I'm done with you. And you let that fear go, and you cross the fire, and you win. And what will happen in your subjective mind is your mind will know that you just did something that's impossible. So anything else in your life that's an unknown, that you don't have an answer for, you apply the exact same experience to that in your life. That's why we do this. That's why we begin this idea of a prosperity class with a fire walk, so that you get that ahead of time. Now, if it's not yours to walk, again, no fault, no blame, no problem. But pay attention to carrying everybody else across the fire. Use this as a way of being supportive. And when you support life, life supports you. There's no losers here. Everybody does this with intention. I'll be on the other end of the fire, but if you have somebody in your life that wants to embrace you when you're complete, when you do this, tell them to stand there with them. I'll hold their back. I'll be there with them. But they will be the one that actually catches you on the other side. One thing that happens is when you walk over the fire is that, first of all, don't have any jewelry on your feet. Because in the fire there's embers, there's glowing embers, and they are really, really hot. And you don't want to get them stuck between your toes or between jewelry and your skin, so you don't wear any jewelry out there. When you walk across the fire and I embrace you, or if somebody else does, somebody's going to be washing your feet with a hose. Cold is going to hit your feet right away because we want to knock anything off that came off with you. Also, I want to invite as many of you as are willing to take your shoes off out there, whether you're walking. Now, I make an exception for me for part of the time because when I'm catching people, they tend to kick embers out of the fire. And sometimes they end up under my feet. I don't enjoy it. I'm glad to walk on the fire when it's my time to walk, if it is my time to walk tonight. And there have been nights when I didn't walk. And there have been times when certainly I walked first, and then everything in between. So whatever it is for me is fine when I'm walking, but when I'm receiving you at the other end, I'm going to have something on my feet so I don't get burned. The idea of everybody having their shoes on is to say we're all one with this. And whether you walk in the fire or you don't, if you have bare feet, you're saying, I'm participating in this. And if it's doesn't work for you to take your shoes off, I'm not going to police that out there. I'm just really suggesting that. Now here's how you do it when you walk on the fire. You want to be as light as you possibly can. And I'm not a light guy. But in that moment, I receive my lightness. And when I walk across that fire, I walk across it gracefully and gently and lightly, and I just enjoy every step. So what I do is I stand at the fire, and I know it's there, but I don't give it any attention. I don't do this. I had one person one night came up to the fire. One
to put their toe in it. It doesn't work. So what you do is you connect with the other side. You know that it's about 4 steps. Some people it's 3. You don't run. You walk gracefully with poise. Off. No. Just like that. That's how long it takes. Here's the way not to do it. People try that. Great way to push that energy up in you. Walk as lightly as you can. And when you're watching other people walk, lift them up. See them just gliding across that fire. Lift them up. See them successful. Now, we always have an out that I give everybody. If you step on the fire and go, it doesn't work, step off. Just turn to the side and step off. Now, what we have is out there is there's still some logs in the fire. They will be raked to one side. If you decide to step off the other way. Don't try to climb over this pile of burning logs. But again, I have never seen anybody do that. Everybody that's gotten on the fire seems to get through it. So it happens very quickly. But you know, it's up to you as to what you feel. Some people feel an intense heat. Some people don't feel anything. It's whatever you're into. It doesn't matter. There's not a right or wrong way to do it. The idea is that you are more powerful than the fire. So even as you step up to it, can I say that? It's hot. Never done that. That fire started. He makes you say things. There's a camera back there. All right. Okay. Questions? Yes.
Would you address the taking of pictures?
Yes, that's a great idea. We used to have this thing where we would let one person say, I don't want my picture taken, and nobody got to take pictures. That doesn't really work. If you don't want your pictures taken, stay out of the way of the camera. Who's got a camera? Do you want to take pictures with your camera?
Yes.
All right. Just stay in the back somewhere. If you're in the witness protection program, just stay in the back. Okay? And let people take pictures. Because this is a monumental moment for a lot of people. So, but here's the deal. Those of you that want to take pictures, don't take them randomly. Take them of the people you have agreements with. You know, if you want your picture taken, say, Charlie, take my picture. Or whoever. If you don't, just don't. And if you walk, nobody's taking pictures unless you've got an agreement. Yes?
She wants me to be on the other side.
Wonderful.
How can I also do pictures?
You can't. You got to get somebody else to do it. Yeah, you'll figure that out. Somebody's glad to do it. Yes?
You were going to tell us 3 things. One was pay attention.
Oh, you're so good. Pay attention. That was the second one. The first one was, no, the first one was pay attention. Here, yeah, thank you. The second one is expect the best. Expect the best. You don't go to this thing with fear. Go to this thing with a clear intention that everybody's safe, that everybody's successful, that everybody gets out of this what they want. What they want. Thank you. That's number 2. Expect the best. However we do it, this is going to turn out wonderful for all of us. And the third one is, so that I don't mess this up, is go for it. That's the idea of set your intention and then walk straight across. I've already kind of given you that one. So pay attention, expect the best, and go for it. Those are Polly's steps. Thank you for clearing that up because I've wandered. I'm the end. Not through the fire, but so anybody can do this, but you have to do it consciously. Please don't do it with any thought that it's a problem. Yes?
After that is over, do we then go to our car and we come back here?
I would like you all to come back for a brief debrief, just very quickly. If we can all come back in afterwards, it will not take long. I have a gift for you afterwards.
And there's a rumor going around that we have a big tray of watermelon. And many people do this and they are voraciously hungry. So perhaps a piece of watermelon will satisfy you till you get real food. Any other questions? Any other thoughts? Yes?
Are we going to do a visualization like we did before? Or, like, for example, when I walked before, we walked through a visualization of what that would be like. And at first I thought, well, I want it to be like walking on ice. And I'm like, no, because I don't want to slip and fall. But then I had a visualization that it was going to be like walking across white, fluffy snow. And that's exactly what it was like.
Does it feel like that to you? Good for you. You have the ability to do it. You can create this anything that you want. There's no right or wrong thing to experience. I find it to be intensely hot. But that's okay, because even heat, I can be more powerful than heat. So that is what really works for me. But everybody does it their own way. Let's let everybody have their experience out there and just see how it goes. But it seems like you've got yours. That's nice.
Well, we just did a visualization as a group last time.
Yeah, and they're always different.
Okay.
Yeah, intentionally. Any other questions, thoughts, comments, possibilities? You ready to do this? Okay, when we go out there, we're going to keep the chatter down. I'm going to work the fire and get it ready.
Be with my significant Buck, who has passed on from colon cancer. And it was really interesting because we met 5 years ago. And of course, being in North Florida, in a very conservative area, we met by the internet. Well, that was just absolutely mind-blowing to his family. And, you know, he was like, but it was really interesting because after he passed, his 2 daughters were very beautiful, family, and so forth, just came right out. You're after Dad's money, whatever that was that they received and went after. And so for 2 months almost now, I have been, my very good friend Jerry, I had to leave my home. I had to put down and also find homes for 6 pets. And I packed myself up and I drove up here. And I've lived in Greenfield before. And one of the things that I kept struggling with was, what did I do? Well, how could I rectify this? How can I make this better? These girls are suffering. They blame me for whatever their suffering is. And it's like, what I get is that we're bigger than all of that. We're not. And it's like, and what hurts is the feeling that someone is suffering. And I watched Buck. I went through 36 months with him with terminal cancer. And because I did, and part of my soul's work was I was beckoning to support him in his transition. And I took a course with Neil last fall, and that became clear and clear that we're here to support one another. Bottom line.
Yeah.
Just, we're here. And so, doing this tonight and this opportunity of having this loving community here is just transporting.
Yeah.
It's transformational. And so what I got tonight was that I'm bigger than all that stuff. And that no matter what they think, I have to send my love back out to them and keep my heart open that somewhere along the line they saw me walking over this flyer, because part of that was for them and for Buck and for myself. Because if we don't, and Buck was the type of person, because we lived with a lot of snakes, you know, and there's rattlesnakes where we lived and all that stuff, and every morning I do my walking, I get the lecture. Watch the snakes, take your stick, do this, do that. And so I take the dog and we just walk around all fields, but his 82-year-old son said, watch the snakes. You know, I just saw one the other day, and it's like, yeah, show. Okay. So it's like, you just have to go above the snakes and above the cars and all that stuff. And just
Because you're bigger than that. You're bigger than that.
yeah, we should come up with a rattlesnake. So it's really, and thank you for letting me share this, because it has been just a heartbreaker. I have just cried and still see the eyes of my pets, you know, his son, Buck, who suffered. And so, and he made his transition in hospice, and I was there with him when he made his transition. But it was so heartbreaking to have this other thing that was not on my radar. I don't have that on my radar. to just, have that occur, and I'm going, what the hell's the lesson here, man? I mean, what am I supposed to be getting? And I still don't know.
Something went on, somebody else? What comes to me on this idea of us doing this together, thank you for that, is comes from a story that happened last year. Tony Robbins does fireworks, and he did a big fire walk, and everybody did the walk, and he said to everybody, if you want to go back out there and walk some more, go ahead. Everybody that went back out there on their own got burned, because they were doing it on their own. We do this as community. This is a spiritual community. The purpose of spiritual community is to create a safe place where we can come and practice being our true selves. Come out of the image that we were created into by our families and by our society, and to really shine our light in the world in a safe way where people support us and lift us up. So the exercise of lifting us up tonight is what this community is about. And if you're not a part of this community, you'd like to be, you're welcome to come back. We'll have this class. Barbara will be teaching next Monday night. Thank you, great fire team. Thank you all for showing an extraordinary experience tonight to all of us. It's been amazing. I have two things for you, actually three. One is that you may choose either of these cards that applies to you. One says, I walked on fire, I know I can do anything. The other says, I can always trust my inner guidance. And they both have a quote from my book, 5 Steps to Freedom. It says, when the power within us is revealed and released, we are absolutely free to live our lives to the fullest potential. When we are constantly aware of the power we wield, we are free to live in our wholeness. That is what we seek to do. And I invite you to do that very thing. My other gift to you is for those that can get up here and get it, please. Get some more of them. Card. Yes, ma'am.
I'm very grateful to have participated in this beautiful community. I did not walk on fire. It's irrelevant. I was deeply, deeply touched, moved, and healed.
Thank you.
For those of you who want a souvenir, you can come out tomorrow, or probably any day for the next week or so, and get coals. We'll have little baggies and out there. And for me, the first time I walked on fire, I took a coal and I actually had it put in a plastic cube. And I kept it because it reminded me of that moment when I did that. So the coals will be out there, and if you want to have a memento, you can do that.
Charlie, do you want to say something?
Oh, I was going to say, I was sitting back just sort of enjoying everybody walking across the fire and thinking, at 74, I don't have to prove anything. I've done it a couple of times. And I saw Jane Christensen, yeah! Oh, hell, I'm in trouble.
You did good, Charlie. You did too, Jane. In fact, all of you did great. Thank you so much for this. God bless you.